At first glance, it's hard to imagine the title of Mark Strand's latest book, Almost Invisible, as a description of its author. A former Poet Laureate of the United States and Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, recipient of the Pulitzer Prize, a MacArthur Genius Fellowship, and the Bollingen Prize for Poetry, to name just a few of his literary laurels, Strand more closely resembles the title of an earlier book, The Monument, or maybe even the later volume, Blizzard of One, when considered in light of his place in the landscape of modern American poetry. From a certain angle, everything about Strand seems larger than life. Indeed, when I first met him 10 years ago, Strand informed me that he was the biggest baby ever born on Prince Edward Island. "Oh, how big were you?" I asked. There was a brief pause, a classic Strand caesura, and then the reply, 37 pounds. So what draws this abundantly, I just wanted to do my Mark Strand impersonation. So what draws this abundantly, eminently, opulently visible man to the spectral realm at the edge of invisibility? In his Adagia, Wallace Stevens described the figure of the poet as the priest of the invisible. This is a little too lofty and pious, I think, to apply to Strand. The thought of him in a surplice at the Cathedral of Invisibility belongs in an absurdist film by Luis Buñuel. Elsewhere, though, Stevens hears grackles squabbling on a heap of garbage, and the phrase invisible priest comes to him. That seems to get a little closer to the spirit of Strand's art. Neither a priest of the invisible nor an invisible priest, this writer is the man on the dump who utters with equal parts longing and irony luxuriant phrases like aptest Eve, stanza my stone, and, yes, invisible priest, knowing all too well the spectrality of desire's objects and of our objections to desire itself. This accounts for the crepuscular quality of Strand's literary investigations. The things of the world become almost invisible at dusk, when the light of day intermingles with darkness. Like the lovers of the in-between in his poem The Enigma of the Infinitesimal, Strand can be glimpsed at dusk, walking along the shore, standing in doorways, leaning from windows, or straddling the slow-moving edge of a shadow throughout his work. The title poem of his first collection ends with the image of the poet sleeping with one eye open, hoping that nothing will happen. Now, nearly 50 years later, Strand muses upon those who lie in bed with one eye closed and the other open, hoping to catch the last second of consciousness and the first of sleep, to inhabit that no man's land, that beautiful place, to behold, as only a god might, the luminous conjunction of nothing and all. There are many reasons for moving, and many for sleeping with one eye open. This restless and watchful poet knows them all. Please join me in welcoming Mark Strand.
Thank you very much, Chiku. I'm almost invisible because I'm the age I am. And I'm not getting any younger. I'm just going to read from my latest book, Almost Invisible, and I'm going to start at the beginning and end at the end. And I'll skip a few poems in between that no longer interest me and I don't think would interest you. That's fairly presumptuous of me, but there it is. A banker in the brothel of blind women. A banker strutted into the brothel of blind women. I'm a shepherd, he announced, and blow my shepherd's pipe as often as I can, but I have lost my flock and feel that I am at a critical point in my life. I can tell by the way you talk, said one of the women, that you are a banker only pretending to be a shepherd, and that you want us to pity you, which we do because you have stooped so low as to try to make fools of us. My dear, said the banker to the same woman, I can tell that you are a rich widow looking for a little excitement and are not blind at all. This observation suggests, said the woman, that you may be a shepherd after all. For what kind of rich widow would find excitement being a whore only to end up with a banker? Exactly, said the banker. I should say that the character of these, I refused to call them poems for a long time. For me, they were prose pieces. I wrote them as an escape from poetry and the problems of lineation and density that attend the writing of poetry. I just wanted to relax, and so I wrote these rather quickly, easily, and with a great deal of delight. I can't say that about writing poems. It got harder and harder. The character of these prose pieces or poems changes considerably from one to the next. Some are unabashedly melancholy. Some are satirical. Some are like jokes. Some are, well, I don't know what they are, but they happened. Anyway, so be prepared for quick changes in these things. See, they've gone from poems to prose pieces to things. God knows where they'll end up. Invisibility, I suspect. Bury your face in your hands. Because we have crossed the river, and the wind offers only a numb uncoiling of cold, and we have meekly adapted, no longer expecting more than we have been given, nor wondering how it happened that we came to this place. We don't mind that nothing turned out as we thought it might. There is no way to clear the haze in which we live, no way to know that we have undergone another day. The silent snow of thought melts before it has a chance to stick. Where we are is anyone's guess. The gates to nowhere multiply, and the present is so far away, so deeply far away. Anywhere could be somewhere. I might have come from the high country, or maybe the low country, I don't recall which. I might have come from the city, but what city in what country is beyond me? I might have come from the outskirts of a city from which others have come, or maybe a city from which only I have come. Who's to know? Who's to decide if it rained or the sun was out? Who's to remember? They say things are happening at the border, but nobody knows which border. They talk of a hotel there where it doesn't matter if you forgot your suitcase. Another will be waiting, big enough, and just for you. Harmony in the boudoir. After years of marriage, he stands at the foot of the bed and tells his wife that she will never know him, that for everything he says, there is more that he does not say, that behind each word he utters, there is another word, and hundreds more behind that one. All those unsaid words, he says, contain his true self, which has been betrayed by the superficial self before her. So you see, he says, kicking off his slippers, I am more than what I have led you to believe I am. Oh, you silly man, says his wife. Of course you are. I find that just thinking of you having so many selves receding into nothingness is very exciting. That you barely exist as you are couldn't please me more. To have clarities of the non-existent. A part of the pleasure of writing this book was thinking of these titles. Clarities of the non-existent. To have loved the way it happens in the empty hours of late afternoon, to lean back and conceive of a journey leaving behind no trace of itself, to look out from the house and see a figure leaning forward as if into the wind, although there is no wind, to see the hats of those in town discarded in moments of passion scattered over the ground, although one cannot see the ground. All this in the vague yellowing light that lowers itself in the hour before dark. None of it of value except for the pleasure it gives, enlarging an instant and finally making it seem as if it were true. And years later, to come upon the same scene, the figure leaning into the same wind, the same hats scattered over the same ground that one cannot see. I'm pausing because I don't know whether I really like this poem. Oh, well, I'll read it anyway. The Minister of Culture gets his wish. The Minister of Culture goes home after a grueling day at the office. He lies on his bed and tries to think of nothing, but nothing happens, or more precisely, does not happen. Nothing is elsewhere doing what nothing does, which is to expand the dark. But the minister is patient, and slowly things slip away. The walls of his house, the park across the street, his friends in the next town. He believes that nothing has finally come to him, and in its absent way is saying, darling, you know how much I have always wanted to please you, and now I have come, and what is more, I have come to stay. And this is a rankly romantic poem, sickeningly so, called The Old Age of Nostalgia. Those hours given over to basking in the glow of an imagined future, of being carried away in streams of promise by a love or a passion so strong that one felt altered forever and convinced that even the smallest particle of the surrounding world was charged with a purpose of impossible grandeur. Ah, yes. And one would look up into the trees and be thrilled by the wind-loosened river of pale gold foliage cascading down, and by the high melodious singing of countless birds. Those moments, so many and so long ago, still come back, but briefly, like fireflies in the perfumed heat of a summer night. Dream testicles, vanished vaginas. Horace, the corpse, said, I kept believing that tomorrow would come and I would get up, put on my socks, my boxer shorts, go to the kitchen, make myself coffee, read the paper, and call some friends. But tomorrow came, and I was not in it. Instead, I found myself on a powder blue sofa in a field of bright grass that rolled on forever. "How awful," said Mildred, who was not yet a corpse, but in close touch with Horace. "How awful to be so far away with nothing to do and without sex to distract you. I've heard that all vaginas up there, even the most open, honest, and energetic, are shut down, and that all testicles, even the most forthright and gifted, swing dreamily among the clouds like little chandeliers." It happens. The buried melancholy of the poet. One summer, when he was still young, he stood at the window and wondered where they had gone, those women who sat by the ocean, watching, waiting for something that would never arrive, the wind light against their skin, sending loose strands of hair across their lips. From what season had they fallen? From what idea of grace had they strayed? It was long since he had seen them in their lonely splendor, heavy in their idleness, enacting the sad story of hope abandoned. This was the summer he wandered out into the miraculous night, into the sea of dark, as if for the first time, to shed his own light. But what he shed was the dark. What he found was the night. And this is my response to Walt Whitman's poem, Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. And the title, Ever So Many Hundred Years Hence, is of course from that poem. Down the milky corridors of fog, starless scenery, the rubble of ocean's breath, that lone figure strolling, gathering about him without shame, a small flood of damages, concessions to a frailty which was his long before he knew what he must do or what he must be, and now with his hand outstretched as if to greet the future, he comes close and pours out to me the subtlety of his meaning, and I see him, my long-lost uncle, great and golden in the sudden sunlight, who predicted that he would reach over the years and be with me, and that I would be waiting. Well, I did want some, but I don't need any. I just swallowed some phlegm. So it's perfectly all right. And I'm going to swallow some more. I'm fine. Clear in the September light, a man stands under a tree, looking at a small house, not far away. He flaps his arms as if he were a bird, maybe signaling someone we cannot see. He could be yelling, but since we hear nothing, he probably is not. Now the wind sends a shiver through the tree and flattens the grass. The man falls to his knees and pounds the ground with his fists. A dog comes and sits beside him, and the man stands once again flapping his arms. What he does has nothing to do with me. His desperation is not my desperation. I do not stand under trees and look at small houses. I have no dog. Well, I'll start over again. No need for that. Some good ones are coming up. You can always get there from here. A traveler returned to the country from which he had started many years before. When he stepped from the boat, he noticed how different everything was. There once were many buildings, but now there were few, and each of them needed repair. In the park where he played as a child, dust-filled shafts of sunlight struck the tawny leaves of trees and withered hedges. Empty trash bags littered the grass. The air was heavy. He sat on one of the benches and explained to the woman next to him that he'd been away a long time, then asked her what season had he come back to. She replied that it was the only one left, the one they had all agreed on. The gallows in the garden. In the garden of the great house, they are building an immense gallows. The head of the great house, who wears a dark suit which he believes shows him to great advantage, defends the gallows size by saying that the executed will thus appear small in death. But his critics, whose taste in clothes can never match his, say that the huge gallows will only signify the importance of the hanged. Nonsense, explains the head of the great house. The gallows are more than the gallows, and the hanged are less than the hanged. Anything else is unthinkable. The triumph of the infinite. I got up in the night and went to the end of the hall. Over the door in large letters it said, "This is the next life. Please come in." I opened the door. Across the room, a bearded man in a pale green suit turned to me and said, "Better get ready. We're taking the long way." Now I'll wake up, I thought. But I was wrong. We began our journey over golden tundra and patches of ice. Then there was nothing for miles around, and all I could hear was my heart pumping and pumping so hard I thought I would die all over again. The mysterious arrival of an unusual letter. It had been a long day at work and a long ride back to the small apartment where I lived. When I got there, I flicked on the light and saw on the table an envelope with my name on it. Where was the clock? Where was the calendar? The handwriting was my father's, but he had been dead for 40 years. As one might, I began to think that maybe, just maybe, he was alive, living a secret life somewhere nearby. How else to explain the envelope? To steady myself, I sat down, opened it, and pulled out the letter. "Dear son," was the way it began. "Dear son, and then nothing. I'm feeding phlegm. This is called Poem of the Spanish Poet. In a hotel room somewhere in Iowa, an American poet, tired of his poems, tired of being an American poet, leans back in his chair and imagines he is a Spanish poet, an old Spanish poet, nearing the end of his life, who walks through the Guadalquivir and watches the ships, gray and ghostly in the twilight, slip downstream. The little waves approaching the grassy bank where he sits whisper something he can't quite hear as they curl and fall. Now, what does the Spanish poet do? He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a notebook, and writes, black fly, why have you come? Is it my shirt, my new white shirt with buttons of bone? Is it my suit, my dark blue suit? Is it because I lie here alone under a willow cold as stone? Black fly, how good you are to come to me now. How good you are to visit me here. Black fly, to wish me goodbye. The enigma of the infinitesimal. You've seen them at dusk, walking along the shore, seen them standing in doorways, leaning from windows or straddling the slow-moving edge of a shadow. Lovers of the in-between, they are neither here nor there, neither in nor out. Poor souls, they're driven to experience the impossible. Even at night, they lie in bed with one eye closed and the other open, hoping to catch the last second of consciousness and the first of sleep, to inhabit that no man's land, that beautiful place, to behold as only a god might, the luminous conjunction of nothing and all. A dream of travel. Comes down from the mountain the cream-colored horse, comes across dun fields and steps lightly into the house, and stands in the bright living room, cloud-like and silent. And now, without warning, the gray arm of the wind takes him away. I loved that horse, thought the poet. I could have loved anything, but I loved that horse. With him I could have gone to the sea, the wrinkled, sorrowing sea, and who knows what I could have done there. Turned wind into marble, made stars shiver in sunlight. Who is that? He doesn't like my poetry. Yeah. The emergency room at dusk. The retired commander was upset. His room in the castle was cold. So was the room across the hall, and all the other rooms as well. He should never have bought this castle when there were so many other cheaper, warmer castles for sale. But he liked the way this one looked, its stone turrets rising into the winter air, its main gate, even its frozen moat on which he thought someday he might ice skate, had a silvery charm. He poured himself a brandy and lit a cigar and tried to concentrate on other things, his many victories, the bravery of his men, but his thoughts swirled in tiny eddies, settling first here, then there, moving as the wind does from empty town to empty town. Once upon a cold November morning, I left the sunlit fields of my daily life and went down into the hollow mountain. And there I discovered in all its chilly glory the glass castle of my other life. I could see right through it and beyond, but what could I do with it? It was perfect, irreducible, and worthless, except for the fact that it existed. Provisional eternity. A man and a woman lay in bed. "Just one more time," said the man. "Just one more time." "Why do you keep saying that?" said the woman. "Because I never wanted to end," said the man. "What don't you want to end?" said the woman. "This," said the man, "this never wanting it to end." The street at the end of the world. Haven't we been down this street before? I think we have. I think they move it every few years, but it keeps coming back with its ravens and dead branches, its crumbling curbs, its lines of people just stepping from a landscape that goes blank the moment they leave it. And what of the walled city with its circling swallows and the sun setting behind it? Haven't we seen that before? And what of the ship about to set off to the Isle of Black Rainbows and Midnight Flowers, and the bearded tour guides waving us on? Yes, my dear, we have seen that too. But now you must hold my arm and close your eyes. An event about which no more need be said. I was riding downtown in a cab with a prince who had consented to be interviewed, but asked that I not mention him or his country by name. He explained that both exist secretly and their business is carried on in silence. He was tall, had a long nose beneath which was tucked a tiny mustache. He wore a pale blue shirt open at the neck and cream-colored pants. "I have no hobbies," he explained. "My one interest is sex. It can be with a man or a woman, old or young, so long as it produces the desired result, which is to remind me of the odor of white truffles or the taste of candied violets in a floating island. Here, let me show you something." When I saw how big it was and what he'd done to it, I screamed and leaped from the moving cab. A short panegyric. Now that the vegetarian nightmare is over and we are back to our diet of meat and deep in the sway of our dark and beautiful habits and able to speak with calm of having survived, let the breeze of the future touch and retouch our large and hungering bodies. Let us march to market to embrace the butcher and put the year of the carrot, the month of the onion behind us. Let us worship the roast or the stew that takes its place once again at the center of the dining room table. A letter from Tegucigalpa. I've never been there, but the letter came from Tegucigalpa. Dear Henrietta, since you were kind enough to ask why I no longer write, I shall do my best to answer you. In the old days, my thoughts, like tiny sparks, would flare up in the almost dark of consciousness, and I would transcribe them, and page after page shone with a light that I called my own. I would sit at my desk, amazed by what had just happened, and even as I watched the lights fade and my thoughts become small, meaningless memorials in the afterglow of so much promise, I was still amazed. And when they disappeared, as they inevitably did, I was ready to begin again, ready to sit in the dark for hours and wait for even a single spark, though I knew it would shed almost no light at all. What I had not realized then, but now know only too well, is that sparks carry within them the wish to be relieved of the burden of brightness. And that is why I no longer write, and why the dark is my freedom and my happiness. Mystery and solitude in Topeka. Afternoon darkens into evening. A man falls deeper and deeper into the slow spiral of sleep, into the drift of it, the length of it, through what feels like mist, and comes at last to an open door through which he passes without knowing why, then again without knowing why, goes to a room where he sits and waits while the room seems to close around him, and the dark is darker than any he has known, and he feels something forming within him without being sure what it is, its hold on him growing as if a story were about to unfold in which two characters, pleasure and pain, commit the same crime, the one that is his, that he will confess to again and again until it means nothing. In the afterlife. She stood beside me for years. Or was it a moment? I cannot remember. Maybe I loved her, maybe I didn't. There was a house, and then no house. There were trees, but none remain. When no one remembers, what is there? You whose moments are gone, who drift like smoke in the afterlife. Tell me something. Tell me anything. Futility in Key West. I was stretched out on the couch, about to doze off, when I imagined a small figure asleep on a couch identical to mine. "Wake up, little man, wake up," I cried. "The one you're waiting for is rising from the sea, wrapped in spume, and soon will come ashore. Beneath her feet the melancholy garden will turn bright green, and the breezes will be light as baby's breath. Wake up before this creature of the deep is gone and everything goes blank as sleep." How hard I try to wake the little man, how hard he sleeps, and the one who rose from the sea, her moment gone, how hard she has become, how hard those burning eyes, that burning hair. It's a busy night. It's all right. I don't care. On the hidden beauty of my sickness. Whenever I thought of my sickness, I would hear the melancholy sound of a viola. When I described it to the doctor, he heard the same sound. "You should keep your sickness to yourself," he said. One cloudless summer day, I went outside. Some crows gathered around me and were silent. I took this as a tribute to the hidden beauty of my sickness. When I told the doctor, he said, "Your sickness may be catching and could ruin everything. Therefore, I am no longer your doctor." Yesterday, when I considered my sickness, I saw my parents naked in the baking heat, kissing and whispering. I was worried where my sickness was leading me, and turned my attention to a distant town, to its golden clock, its white stone villas, its boulevards, crowded with angels shielding their eyes from the sun. With only the stars to guide us. Whenever the giants turned in for the night, taking their huge toys with them, we were left with nothing to play with and slept under sofas and chairs. The gift of bigness would never be ours. This was a truth against which we had tried again and again to turn our tiny backs, and each time had failed. Undone by sorrow, some of us found solace in prayer, and others, like ourselves, chose to follow wild dogs through the dark, moose-crowded woods of the Northland, nursing their hurt until they dropped. Trouble in Pocatello. It was autumn. It was late in the day. A storm was coming. Flocks of birds were flying south. A pink and purple sunset stained the house. The wind gusted. Branches tossed. Leaves dropped like dead moths on a Cecil rug. "I'm home," said the husband. "Not again," said the wife. The social worker and the monkey. Once I sat in a room with a monkey who told me he was not a monkey. I understood his anguish being trapped in a body he detested. "Sir," I said, "I think I know what you are feeling. and I would like to help you. Treat me like a monkey, he said. It serves me right. Nobody knows what is known. A man and a woman were on a train. The man said, "Are we going someplace?" "I don't think so. Not this time. This is already the next century, and look where we are. Nowhere. Tell me, Gwendolen, when we boarded the train, why hadn't we known this day would come?" "Snap out of it," Gwendolen said. The train was crossing an endless snow-covered plain. No town awaited its arrival. No town lamented its departure. It simply kept going, and that was its purpose, to slither dreamlike over blank stretches of country, issuing sorrowful wails that would slowly fade in the cold. Those little legs and awful hands. Night had fallen. A man who was staying at the Grand Hotel walked to the beach, lit a cigar, opened a black umbrella, and leaned back in a canvas beach chair, holding the cigar in one hand and the umbrella in the other. I wanted to ask him, why the umbrella? But I was too timid. Then I heard him say, "Those little legs and awful hands, will I never be rid of them?" I patted my legs, then looked at my hands and knew that he had not meant me, and certainly not himself, but maybe another, someone he might have hated or even loved. But down the beach, a woman wearing very large mittens was coming toward him, rapidly with baby steps. He jumped up from the beach chair, tossed his cigar, and with his umbrella began to run. He ran and ran, trying to escape, as if he could ever escape. Nocturne of the Poet Who Loved the Moon. I've grown tired of the moon, tired of its look of astonishment, the blue ice of its gaze, its arrivals and departures, of the way it gathers lovers and loners under its invisible wings, failing to distinguish between them. I have grown tired of so much that used to entrance me, tired of watching cloud shadows pass over sunlit grass, of seeing swans glide back and forth across the lake, peering into the dark, hoping to find an image of a self as yet unborn. Let plainness enter the eye, plainness like a table on which nothing is set, like a table that is not yet even a table. In the grand ballroom of the new eternity, they sway like drunks in delirious exile from sense, letting their blindness guide them ever farther from what might have been theirs, letting their former selves fade and be lost in the dusk of forgetfulness, never to be regained, never to be more than an idea of once having been, so that the light which had been theirs is gone for good. And when the doctors come, it is too late. The shades above the city have already been drawn. the pockets of wind have been emptied. And this is the last one. The last one I'll read and the last one in the book. When I turned 100, I wanted to go on an immense journey, to travel night and day into the unknown, until, forgetting my old self, I came into possession of a new self, one that I might have missed on my previous travels. But the first step was beyond me. I lay in bed, unable to move, pondering as one does at my age the ways of melancholy, how it seeps into the spirit, how it disincarnates the will, how it banishes the senses to the chill of twilight, how even the best and worst intentions wither in its keep. I kept staring at the ceiling, then suddenly felt a blast of cold air, and I was gone. Thank you.